Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. A Father's Nightmare. Leonardo Erickson arrived home 30 minutes late to his son Nathan's 6th birthday party, expecting to find the usual chaos of children's laughter and cake-smeared faces. Instead, he walked into a scene that would haunt him forever and transform him into something his enemies would learn to fear. The living room was filled with Rosalind's family. Her father Carmen Sanchez holding court like a king, her sister Leticia Sanchez recording everything on her phone with malicious glee. But it was the sight in the center of the room that made Leonardo's blood turn to ice. His 6-year-old son Nathan knelt on the hardwood floor, tears streaming down his face, eating birthday cake from a metal dog bowl that belonged to their German shepherd, Rex. The child's small hands shook as he tried to eat without using utensils, cake crumbling between his fingers. "Animals eat on the floor," Carmen laughed, his beer-soaked voice booming through the room. "It suits you, doesn't it, boy? Look at him go," Leticia snickered, zooming in with her phone camera. "Maybe we should get him a collar next year." The other family members, cousins, aunts, uncles, all laughed along, their faces twisted with cruel amusement. But it was Rosalind's reaction that shattered something fundamental in Leonardo's chest. His wife of 8 years stood watching with her arms crossed, not laughing, but not stopping it either. Worse, there was something almost satisfied in her expression, as if this humiliation was deserved. Nathan looked up briefly and saw his father in the doorway. The hope that flashed in the child's eyes was immediately replaced by shame as he quickly returned to eating from the bowl. "Daddy's home," Rosalind called out with false cheerfulness. "Look, honey, Nathan's learning some manners. My family thought it might teach him not to be so demanding." Leonardo's military training kicked in, the same controlled calm that had kept him alive during 3 tours in Afghanistan. He surveyed the room like a battlefield, cataloging every face, every person who had participated in his son's humiliation. The rage building inside him was volcanic, but his expression remained perfectly neutral. "Interesting party," he said quietly, pulling out his phone and discreetly starting a video recording. "Very educational." Carmen belched loudly. "Kid needed to learn his place. Been getting too uppity lately, making demands like he's some kind of prince." "Yeah," Leticia added, still filming. "Rosalind told us how he threw a tantrum about wanting a real party like other kids. This is what happens when you spoil them." Leonardo knelt beside his son, his voice gentle. "Hey buddy, why don't you go wash your hands and face? I brought something special for you." Nathan scrambled up, cake smeared across his cheeks, and ran toward the bathroom. Leonardo watched him go, then turned back to the assembled crowd with a smile that never reached his eyes. "Well, this has been quite the celebration. I think we're done for today." "Done?" Carmen stood up, swaying slightly. "We're just getting started. Besides, this is Rosalind's house too, and we're her family." "Of course," Leonardo agreed amicably. "But I have some work to catch up on. Early day tomorrow." As the Sanchez family grudgingly gathered their things, Leonardo helped clean up with mechanical efficiency. But his mind was already working, cataloging everything he'd witnessed, planning with the same methodical precision that had made him one of the Army's most effective intelligence officers. After everyone left, he found Nathan in his bedroom, curled up under his blankets. "Daddy, I'm sorry I made them mad," the little boy whispered. Leonardo sat on the edge of the bed, his heart breaking and hardening simultaneously. "You did nothing wrong, son. Nothing at all. But Mama said I was being greedy, wanting a real birthday party. She said I needed to learn." "What kind of learning did Mama think this was?" Nathan's voice became even smaller. "She said some kids don't deserve real parties. That I should be grateful for anything." Leonardo tucked his son in, kissing his forehead. "Get some sleep, buddy. Tomorrow's going to be different." That night, Leonardo sat in his home office, reviewing the video he'd recorded. The casual cruelty, the coordinated humiliation, the way his own wife had orchestrated his son's degradation, it was all there in high definition. But as he studied the footage, he noticed something else. Santiago Cunningham, Rosalind's friend from work, lurking in the background of several shots. The man who'd been coming around more frequently lately, always when Leonardo was traveling for his security consulting business. Leonardo pulled up his laptop and began researching, using skills honed during years of military intelligence work. Phone records, social media, credit card statements. He had access to everything. and what he found made the birthday humiliation seem like a warm-up act. Santiago and Rosalind had been meeting regularly for 8 months. Hotel receipts, restaurant charges, even a jewelry purchase that Leonardo had never seen his wife wear. But more damning were the text messages he recovered from Rosalind's cloud backup. Conversations about how Nathan was in the way of their relationship, how the child was damaged goods that would be better off elsewhere. The final message, sent just hours before the party, made Leonardo's blood run cold. Make sure the little brat knows his place today. Maybe his father will finally see what a burden he is. Leonardo closed the laptop and walked to his gun safe, removing a Sig Sauer P226, his service weapon from Afghanistan. He checked the action, loaded a magazine, and set it on his desk next to a bottle of bourbon. For 3 hours, he sat in the dark, wrestling with thoughts that would have horrified the man he'd been yesterday. By dawn, he'd made his decision. The old Leonardo Erickson, the loving husband, the forgiving father, the man who believed in second chances, had died watching his son eat birthday cake from a dog bowl. What emerged from that office was something much more dangerous. A man with nothing left to lose and all the skills necessary to ensure his enemies paid for every moment of his son's humiliation. Chapter 2. The Soldier's Assessment. The next morning, Leonardo dropped Nathan off at school and headed to his office at Erickson Security Solutions. His company provided high-end security consulting for wealthy clients, but it was a front for more specialized services, the kind that required his particular background in military intelligence and special operations. His assistant, Jean Kerr, looked up as he entered. "You're early today. How was Nathan's party?" "Educational," Leonardo replied, the same word he'd used yesterday. "Jean, I need you to clear my schedule for the next week. Tell our clients I'm conducting a comprehensive security assessment." "For which client?" "Personal project." Jean had worked for him for 4 years and knew better than to ask questions when he used that tone. She'd seen glimpses of the man beneath the businessman veneer, the cold efficiency that emerged when someone threatened what he protected. In his private office, Leonardo activated the soundproofing system and began making calls. The first was to Bruce Landry, a former Delta Force operator who now ran discreet investigation services. "Leo, what can I do for you?" "I need a complete workup on Santiago Cunningham and the Sanchez family. Everything: finances, relationships, weaknesses, secrets. No limits on methods." "This sounds personal." "It is. How quickly can you move?" "Give me 48 hours for the preliminary report. A week for the deep dive. You have 24 hours for everything. Money is no object." The second call went to Dustin Bright, a former military intelligence specialist who'd helped Leonardo with sensitive operations before. "I need surveillance equipment installed in my home. Full audio and video coverage, completely undetectable. Also need monitoring on multiple cell phones and email accounts." "When do you need this done?" "Today, while my wife is at work." "Consider it done." The third call was the most important. Mikkel Sims, a former Navy SEAL who'd transitioned into private military contracting. "Leo, been a while. What's the situation?" "I need a team on standby. Discreet, professional, no questions asked. The kind of work we used to do overseas, but with more personal stakes." "How personal?" "Someone hurt my son. Multiple someones." The line was quiet for a moment. Mikkel had children of his own. "What's the mission parameters?" "Total psychological and physical destruction of the targets. No permanent physical harm initially, but I want them broken. Completely." "Understood. When do we move?" "I'll let you know." "But Mikkel, when this goes active, there's no backing down. No mercy, no forgiveness, no limits." "Copy that. We'll be ready." By noon, Dustin's team had installed military-grade surveillance equipment throughout Leonardo's house. Cameras the size of pinheads, audio pickups that could detect whispers from 50 feet away, and network taps that would capture every digital communication. Leonardo returned home for lunch, ostensibly to check on something he'd forgotten. What he actually did was plant additional devices in Rosalind's car, her purse, and her jewelry box. If she sneezed, he'd know about it. That evening, he played the role of concerned husband perfectly. "How was your day, honey?" he asked as Rosalind prepared dinner. "Fine. Stressful. I think the party yesterday was too much for Nathan. He seemed upset this morning." "Can't imagine why," Leonardo said, his tone neutral. "It was certainly memorable. My family was just trying to teach him some humility." He's been getting spoiled lately. MMM. Leonardo sipped his wine, watching his wife move around the kitchen. 8 years of marriage, and he was only now seeing her clearly. How's work going? Still spending a lot of time on that Santiago project. Rosalind's hand paused for just a fraction of a second as she chopped vegetables. It's keeping me busy. He's demanding. I'm sure he is. That night, after Rosalind fell asleep, Leonardo reviewed the day's surveillance footage on his laptop. His wife had made 17 phone calls to Santiago, including one explicit conversation about meeting him the next day while Nathan was in school and Leonardo was supposedly out of town on business. But it was the final conversation of the day that sealed Rosalind's fate. She'd called her sister Letitia, and their discussion made Leonardo's decision for him. The birthday thing was perfect, Rosalind had said. Did you see how broken he looked? Santiago thinks if we keep pushing, Leo will eventually realize the kid's more trouble than he's worth. What's the endgame? Letitia had asked. Santiago has connections in the foster system. There are ways to make a child disappear into the system, especially if there are questions about the father's stability. And Leo? Once Nathan's gone, Leo will either fall in line or we'll find a way to get rid of him too. Santiago's done this before. Leonardo had heard enough. He closed the laptop and walked to Nathan's room, standing in the doorway watching his son sleep. The child was everything good in Leonardo's life. Innocent, trusting, full of potential. And these people wanted to destroy him for their own convenience. Leonardo returned to his office and opened a secure communication channel. The message he sent was brief but comprehensive. Operation Golden Shield is active. All targets confirmed hostile. Rules of engagement. Unlimited escalation authorized. The replies came back within minutes from his team. Copy that. Game on. Chapter 3. The Web Unfolds. Bruce Landry's preliminary report arrived 18 hours later, and it painted a picture darker than Leonardo had imagined. Santiago Cunningham wasn't just an adulterer. He was a predator with a history spanning 2 decades. The report detailed Santiago's pattern. Target married women with children, seduce them, manipulate them into alienating their kids from their fathers, then help arrange for the children to be placed in foster homes through his network of corrupt social workers. The children would disappear into a system where Santiago and his associates had easy access to vulnerable minors. 7 families destroyed. 12 children vanished into foster care, their fathers discredited or eliminated. Santiago's network included family court judges, child protective services workers, and even police officers who would file false reports when needed. But the most damning evidence was financial. Santiago had been receiving payments from wealthy pedophiles for access to the children he helped steal from their families. The birthday humiliation wasn't just cruelty, it was grooming, preparing Nathan for a fate worse than death. Leonardo read the report twice, his military training warring with paternal rage. By the time he finished, the rage had won. He immediately called an emergency meeting with his team at a secure location, an abandoned warehouse his company used for training exercises. Mikkel Sims arrived first, followed by Bruce Landry and Dustin Bright. The 3 men had served with Leonardo in various capacities, and they recognized the look in his eyes. "Gentlemen," Leonardo began, "what I'm about to share with you changes the nature of our operation. This isn't just about revenge anymore. It's about preventing future victims." He laid out Santiago's entire operation, the network of corruption, the children who'd been trafficked. The room grew deadly quiet as the implications sank in. "Jesus Christ," Bruce muttered. "How many kids?" "At least 12 confirmed, probably more. And my son was going to be number 13. Mikkel cracked his knuckles. "What's the plan?" "Total network dismantlement. We start with the Sanchez family. They're the weak links. Use them to get to Santiago and his network. Then we work our way up the chain until everyone involved is neutralized." "Neutralized how?" Dustin asked. "Permanently, when necessary. These people have been protected by corruption and intimidation for years. They think they're untouchable." Leonardo's smile was colder than winter. They're about to learn otherwise. That evening, Leonardo put his plan into motion. He told Rosalind he had to travel to Denver for a client emergency, giving her the perfect opportunity to meet Santiago. "I'll be gone for 3 days," he said, packing a bag for show. "Will you be okay with Nathan?" "Of course. Actually, my father wanted to take him fishing this weekend. Give me some time to catch up on work." That sounds nice. Nathan loves spending time with your family. The lie came so easily to Rosalind that Leonardo almost admired her skill. Almost. After kissing his son goodbye, Leonardo drove to the airport but never boarded his flight. Instead, he met his team at a safe house across town, where they monitored every movement of their targets through the surveillance network. Within hours, the traps began springing. Carmen Sanchez received a call from someone claiming to be an IRS investigator, informing him that his disability payments were under review for fraud. The caller, actually Bruce using a voice modifier, scheduled an appointment for the next morning at a government building that didn't exist. Letitia got a message from a modeling agency saying they'd seen her Instagram photos and wanted to discuss a contract. The address led to an empty studio where hidden cameras would record her humiliation when she realized she'd been duped. But the main event was Santiago's meeting with Rosalind at the Riverside Hotel. What neither of them knew was that Dustin had replaced the regular cleaning staff with his own people, installing recording equipment in their usual room. Leonardo watched the feed from his command center, documenting every word, every gesture, every detail of their betrayal. But he wasn't just gathering evidence. He was studying their psychology, learning their weaknesses, preparing to exploit every vulnerability. Phase 1 complete. He told his team as they watched Santiago and Rosalind plan Nathan's removal from Leonardo's custody. Tomorrow we start applying pressure. I want them to feel helpless, confused, terrified. I want them to understand what my son felt eating from that bowl. And after that, Mikel asked. Leonardo's expression could have frozen blood. After that, we give them a taste of humiliation they'll choke on for years. And then we make sure they never hurt another child again. The old Leonardo Erickson had believed in justice through proper channels, in following rules and respecting authority. But that man had died watching his son's birthday party. What remained was a weapon with unlimited resources, specialized training, and absolutely nothing left to lose. The war for Nathan's future was about to begin. Chapter 4: Psychological Warfare. Leonardo's campaign began at dawn with surgical precision. While his targets slept peacefully, believing themselves safe in their web of corruption, his team dismantled their world piece by piece. Carmen Sanchez woke to find his truck's tires slashed and his mailbox stuffed with official-looking documents claiming he owed $47,000 in back taxes. The documents were expertly forged, complete with case numbers that would check out if anyone bothered to verify them. Letitia discovered that her identity had been stolen overnight. Her credit cards maxed out on purchases she never made, her bank accounts frozen for suspicious activity, and her social media accounts hacked to post embarrassing content that would destroy her reputation. But Santiago's torment was more sophisticated. He arrived at his office to find it swarming with FBI agents conducting a routine investigation into financial irregularities. The agents were real. Bruce had called in favors from his federal contacts, but they weren't there for Santiago. They were investigating the company next door. The confusion would last hours, during which Santiago's employees and clients would see him sweating and panicking. Leonardo monitored everything from his command center, adjusting tactics in real time like a general directing a battle. Each action was designed to create maximum psychological pressure while leaving no traceable connection to him. Phase 2 initiating. He told Mikel over encrypted communication. Target Rosalind at her workplace. Rosalind worked as a coordinator at St. Catherine's Elementary School, ironically helping to protect children from the very predator she was delivering her own son to. Leonardo's plan for her was particularly cruel in its elegance. Dustin had infiltrated the school's computer system and planted evidence suggesting Rosalind had been embezzling from the Student Activities Fund. The evidence was completely fabricated but expertly crafted. When the principal discovered the discrepancies, Rosalind would find herself under investigation by both the school board and law enforcement. But the real masterstroke came when Nathan called his mother during lunch. "Mommy, there are police officers at my school asking questions about you. They wanted to know if you ever brought strange men around me." The call, which Leonardo had orchestrated through a contact at Child Protective Services, sent Rosalind into a panic. She raced to Nathan's school, only to find no police officers and a confused principal who had no idea what she was talking about. "Mrs. Erickson, are you feeling all right? You seem distressed." The seeds of doubt about Rosalind's mental stability had been planted in the mind of someone who worked closely with children. It was a long-term investment that would pay dividends later. Meanwhile, Santiago was dealing with his own escalating problems. His car had been impounded for unpaid parking tickets that had mysteriously appeared in the system overnight. His apartment building's management company received an anonymous tip about suspicious activities in his unit, leading to an inspection that revealed nothing but created a paper trail suggesting he was under investigation. Most damaging of all, his contacts in the foster care system began receiving calls from a federal task force investigating child trafficking. The calls weren't real, but they were enough to make Santiago's network go silent, cutting off his access to the very corruption that made his scheme possible. By evening, all three primary targets were in full panic mode. Leonardo watched through his surveillance network as they made increasingly desperate phone calls, trying to understand who was targeting them and why. The breakthrough came when Rosalind called Santiago, her voice shrill with fear. "Someone knows about us. About everything. The school thinks I'm embezzling, CPS thinks I'm abusing Nathan, and my family is falling apart." "Calm down," Santiago said, but Leonardo could hear the strain in his voice. "It's probably just coincidence. Bad luck. This isn't luck. Someone is doing this to us deliberately." "Who? Leonardo? He's in Denver, and he's too soft to pull off something like this." "Then who?" Santiago was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know, but if someone's targeting us, we need to accelerate the timeline. Get Nathan placed in the system this week, not next month." "This week?" "Santiago, I can't." "You can and you will. Once the kid's gone and your husband's discredited, this all goes away. Trust me." Leonardo had heard enough. He activated his emergency communication system, sending encrypted messages to every member of his team. Timeline accelerated. Targets planning to move against Nathan within 72 hours. Operation Golden Shield enters final phase. All constraints removed. The gloves were coming off. Chapter 5, The Trap Springs. Leonardo's response to Santiago's accelerated timeline was swift and merciless. If they wanted to move against Nathan within 72 hours, he would give them a war they weren't prepared to fight. He began by targeting the weakest link, Carmen Sanchez. The elderly man had been drinking heavily since his morning encounter with the fake tax documents, and Leonardo's team used that vulnerability against him. Mikel and Dustin followed Carmen to his regular bar, where they posed as fellow drinkers and struck up conversations about government overreach and corrupt officials. "You look like a man with troubles," Mikel said, sliding onto the bar stool next to Carmen. "Goddamn IRS wants to steal everything I worked for," Carmen slurred. $47,000 they say I owe. "Bullshit. Same thing happened to my brother-in-law," Dustin added from Carmen's other side. Turned out his ex-wife had been filing false reports, trying to get revenge. "You have any enemies who might pull something like that?" Carmen's alcohol-soaked brain latched onto the suggestion. "My daughter's husband. Military boy, thinks he's better than us. Never liked how we treated his brat kid." "What did you do to the kid?" Carmen laughed bitterly and began describing Nathan's birthday humiliation in detail, not realizing that Mikel was recording every word. By the time Carmen finished his story, he'd confessed to child abuse, conspiracy to commit fraud, and revealed details about Santiago's plan to place Nathan in foster care. The recording was pure gold, but Leonardo wanted more. "Sounds like this military guy has it out for you," Mikel said. "Maybe you should get ahead of this. File complaints with CPS about how he treats the kid. Protect yourself, you know." Carmen's eyes lit up with malicious inspiration. Yeah, that's smart. Show everyone what kind of father he really is." The next morning, Carmen Sanchez walked into the Department of Children and Family Services and filed a formal complaint against Leonardo, claiming the man was psychologically abusing Nathan and that the child needed to be removed from the home immediately. What Carmen didn't know was that the social worker he spoke with, Georgia Sawyer, was actually one of Bruce's contacts who'd been briefed on the situation. She took Carmen's statement, recorded it all, and then filed a report that would trigger an investigation, but not the kind Carmen expected. Instead of investigating Leonardo, DCFS opened a case examining Carmen's own history with children, using the recorded confession from the bar as evidence. Within hours, Carmen found himself under investigation for child abuse, with his disability benefits suspended pending the outcome. Letitia's downfall came through her own vanity. Still reeling from her identity theft and social media humiliation, she jumped at the opportunity when a prestigious modeling agency called offering a high-paying photo shoot. The agency was fake, run by Dustin's team, but the offer was irresistible. $5,000 for a day's work, plus potential for national advertising campaigns. Letitia arrived at the studio, actually a warehouse Leonardo's company used for tactical training, expecting to be treated like a star. Instead, she found herself in a recreation of Nathan's birthday party. "Welcome to your audition," the fake photographer said. "We're casting for a commercial about humility and learning your place in society. We need you to demonstrate how effectively you can portray submission." The setup was identical to what they'd done to Nathan. A metal bowl on the floor, food that had to be eaten without utensils, cameras recording every moment. But unlike Nathan, Letitia had a choice. "I'm not eating from a bowl like some animal," she said indignantly. "Then you don't get paid. And we'll be sharing your audition video with all the other agencies in the city, showing them how unprofessional you are." Letitia looked around the room, seeing the professional equipment, the contracts that looked legitimate, the money they'd promised to pay her. Her credit cards were maxed out, her accounts frozen, and she desperately needed the cash. Just this once. Just this once. Leonardo watched the feed from his command center as Letitia knelt on the concrete floor and began eating from the bowl, tears of humiliation streaming down her face. Every angle was captured in high definition, every moment of her degradation preserved for posterity. But unlike Nathan's birthday party, this humiliation served a purpose beyond cruelty. While Letitia was trapped in the warehouse, Bruce's team was searching her apartment, planting evidence that would implicate her in Santiago's child trafficking network. The evidence was subtle but damning. Burner phones with calls to known traffickers, cash deposits that matched payments from Santiago's operation, and most crucially, photos of children who'd been placed in foster care through Santiago's network. By the time Letitia finished her audition and received her payment, she was unknowingly carrying marked bills that would tie her directly to Santiago's criminal enterprise. "How do you feel?" the fake photographer asked as she prepared to leave. Humiliated, Letitia admitted, wiping tears from her eyes. "Good. Now you know how a 6-year-old boy felt on his birthday." The revelation hit her like a physical blow. Leonardo? This was all Leonardo. This was justice. And it's just the beginning. Chapter 6. The net closes. Santiago Cunningham had built his criminal empire on the principle that he was always the smartest person in the room. He manipulated emotions, exploited weaknesses, and stayed 3 steps ahead of any potential threats. But he'd never faced an opponent like Leonardo Erickson. The systematic destruction of his network began with a simple phone call. "Mr. Cunningham? This is Agent Michelle Savage with the FBI's Crimes Against Children Unit. We'd like to schedule an interview regarding your involvement with several missing persons cases." Santiago's blood turned to ice. "I think there's been some mistake. I don't know anything about missing persons. Sir, we have financial records linking you to payments received for facilitating the placement of minors in foster care. We'd appreciate your cooperation in this matter." The call was real. Bruce had contacted the FBI with evidence from his investigation, triggering a legitimate federal inquiry. But Santiago didn't know that his every move was being monitored, his communications intercepted, his escape routes systematically eliminated. Within hours of the FBI contact, Santiago's criminal network began unraveling as each member received similar calls. Corrupt social workers, bribed judges, trafficking facilitators, all of them suddenly found themselves under federal investigation. But Santiago's real nightmare began when he tried to flee. His passport had been flagged in the system, his bank accounts frozen by federal order, and his credit cards mysteriously canceled. When he tried to book a flight out of the country, he was politely informed that he was on the no-fly list pending the investigation. Trapped and desperate, Santiago made the call Leonardo had been waiting for. He contacted Rosalind, demanding they meet immediately to plan their escape. "We need to grab the kid and run," Santiago told her when they met at their usual hotel room. "The FBI is closing in, and our window is closing." "Grab Nathan?" "Santiago, that's kidnapping. It's family court custody modification. We have the paperwork ready, remember? Your father filed abuse complaints against Leonardo, and my contact at DCFS will fast-track the removal order. What neither of them knew was that their private conversation was being broadcast live to a room full of FBI agents, local police, and prosecutors. Dustin's surveillance equipment had turned their meeting into a confession session. "This is insane," Rosalind said, pacing the hotel room. "We should just disappear, leave the country. With what money? They've frozen everything. And even if we could run, leaving the kid behind means he'll eventually talk. He's seen too much, knows too much." "What are you saying?" Santiago's mask finally slipped completely. "I'm saying the kid's a loose end that needs to be tied up. Permanently." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. In the FBI listening room, agents exchanged grim looks as they realized they weren't just dealing with fraud and corruption, they were preventing a murder. Leonardo, monitoring from his own command center, felt something cold and final settle in his chest. Santiago had just threatened his son's life on a federal wiretap. The gloves weren't just off now, they'd been incinerated. "All teams, this is Lion." Leonardo spoke into his encrypted communication system, using his old military call sign. "Package is confirmed hostile with lethal intent toward primary asset. Authorization granted for terminal intervention." The response came back immediately from Mikkel. "Copy that, Lion. Terminal intervention authorized. Moving to intercept." But Leonardo had one more card to play before his team moved in for the kill. He called Santiago's phone directly. "Hello, Santiago. I understand you've been having some difficulties lately." Santiago's voice was strangled with fear. "Leonardo? How did you get this number? Where are you?" "I'm everywhere, Santiago. I've been watching you, listening to you, learning everything about your disgusting operation. Did you really think you could threaten my son and just walk away?" "I don't know what you're talking about." "The birthday party, Santiago. Making my 6-year-old son eat from a bowl like a dog while you and my wife's family laughed. Planning to steal him from me and sell him to pedophiles. And just now, discussing his murder like it's a business decision." The silence on the line was deafening. Finally, Santiago found his voice. "You can't prove anything." "I don't need to prove anything, Santiago. I have federal agents listening to your confession right now. I have video evidence of your crimes, financial records of your trafficking network, and testimony from your victims. But more importantly, I have something you've never faced before." "What's that?" "A father with nothing left to lose and all the skills necessary to destroy you completely." The line went dead. In the hotel room, Santiago stared at his phone with dawning horror as he realized the full scope of his predicament. He wasn't just facing investigation. He was facing war with a man who'd spent years learning how to eliminate enemies without leaving a trace. Outside the hotel, Michael's team was already in position. Inside the room, hidden cameras captured every moment of Santiago's panic. And across the city, federal agents were preparing arrest warrants based on the evidence Leonardo had provided. The trap had closed completely. Now came the final act: justice. Chapter 7. No Mercy. The FBI raid on the Riverside Hotel came at dawn, 6 hours after Santiago's confession. Federal agents stormed the building with military precision, arresting Santiago and Rosalind before they could destroy evidence or flee. But their capture was just the opening move in Leonardo's endgame. From his command center, Leonardo watched the arrests with cold satisfaction. Santiago fought the handcuffs, screaming about his rights and demanding a lawyer. Rosalind collapsed into hysterical tears, begging to see Nathan one last time. Both reactions were exactly what Leonardo had predicted and planned for. Phase 3 complete, he reported to his team. Primary targets in federal custody. Secondary targets ready for processing. The secondary targets, Carmen Sanchez and the rest of the family network, were picked up within hours. The child abuse charges against Carmen had escalated when investigators found evidence of his involvement with Santiago's trafficking operation. Letitia's apartment search had yielded enough evidence to charge her as an accessory to multiple federal crimes. But Leonardo's revenge was far from complete. While the legal system processed his enemies, Leonardo implemented his own form of justice. The surveillance footage from Nathan's birthday party was anonymously leaked to every major news outlet in the city, along with complete documentation of Santiago's trafficking network and the corruption that had protected it. The public reaction was volcanic. Within 24 hours, #JusticeForNathan was trending on social media, with millions of people expressing outrage at the systematic abuse and corruption. Death threats poured in for everyone involved, forcing them to be placed in protective custody. But the most devastating blow came when Leonardo released the hotel room recording of Santiago discussing Nathan's murder. "The kid's a loose end that needs to be tied up permanently." The words played on every news channel, every podcast, every social media platform. Santiago's casual discussion of murdering a 6-year-old child destroyed any possibility of public sympathy or plea bargaining. Leonardo watched the media frenzy from his home office, Nathan safely asleep upstairs under the protection of a private security team. His son would never again be vulnerable to the monsters who'd tried to destroy him. But Leonardo wasn't finished. The corruption network that had protected Santiago ran deep, and Leonardo had evidence implicating dozens of officials, judges, and social workers. One by one, he began releasing their involvement, destroying careers, and triggering criminal investigations that would span years. Judge Alfredo Patterson, who'd been taking bribes to facilitate Santiago's custody manipulations, was arrested on federal corruption charges. Social worker Dennis Best, who'd been placing children with approved trafficking families, was found dead in his cell before he could testify, an apparent suicide that no one questioned too closely. Detective Grover Underwood, who'd been covering up missing children reports, disappeared entirely. His body was never found, but his offshore bank accounts were mysteriously emptied and donated to children's advocacy groups. Each elimination was clean, professional, and completely untraceable to Leonardo. His military training and intelligence background made him a ghost in the system, striking without warning and vanishing without a trace. But his masterpiece was reserved for Rosalind herself. Chapter 8. The Final Judgments. Rosalind's federal trial became a media sensation, with Leonardo attending every session accompanied by Nathan. The boy, now 7 years old, had been through months of therapy to deal with the trauma of his birthday, humiliation, and the revelation of his mother's betrayal. Leonardo had carefully prepared Nathan for this moment, explaining in age-appropriate terms that some people make very bad choices and have to face consequences. The child understood that his mother had tried to hurt him and that his father was making sure it never happened again. On the day Rosalind took the stand, Nathan sat in the gallery wearing his best suit, holding his father's hand with quiet dignity. When Rosalind's eyes found his across the courtroom, she broke down completely. "Nathan, baby, I'm sorry," she sobbed from the witness stand. "I never meant for any of this to happen. I love you so much." Nathan looked at his mother with the clear, honest gaze of childhood and spoke words that would haunt Rosalind for the rest of her life. "You made me eat from a bowl like a dog on my birthday. That's not love." The courtroom fell silent as the simple truth from a child's mouth cut through all the legal maneuvering and emotional manipulation. Rosalind had no answer, no excuse, no justification that could overcome the devastating honesty of her victim. The prosecution, armed with Leonardo's evidence, painted a picture of systematic child abuse, trafficking, and conspiracy that left no room for mercy. The defense tried to argue that Rosalind had been manipulated by Santiago, but the hotel room recordings proved she'd been an enthusiastic participant in planning Nathan's removal and potential murder. The verdict was swift and unanimous, guilty on all counts. Santiago's trial was even shorter. Faced with overwhelming evidence and public hatred, his lawyer negotiated a plea deal: life in prison without parole in exchange for cooperation in dismantling the remaining trafficking network. But Leonardo had one final surprise for Santiago. On the day Santiago was transferred to federal prison, his transport van was attacked by unknown assailants. Santiago was killed in what appeared to be a gang retaliation, the kind of violence that was common when child predators entered the prison system. The investigation into his death went nowhere. Security cameras malfunctioned, witnesses disappeared, and the attackers were never identified. Leonardo's alibi was ironclad. He'd been in court with Nathan at the time, visible to hundreds of witnesses. Carmen Sanchez died of a heart attack while awaiting trial, brought on by the stress of facing federal charges and the collapse of his disability fraud scheme. Letitia received 20 years in federal prison, where she would spend every day remembering the taste of dog food and the humiliation she'd helped inflict on an innocent child. The entire corruption network that had protected Santiago was dismantled, with over 50 arrests and a complete reorganization of the city's child services department. New safeguards were put in place to prevent trafficking, and Leonardo quietly funded several organizations dedicated to protecting vulnerable children. Chapter 9. A New Beginning. 2 years after Nathan's 7th birthday party, Leonardo and his son lived in a new city under new identities. The Federal Witness Protection Program had offered them sanctuary after Leonardo's cooperation in destroying Santiago's network, but that was just the official story. The truth was that Leonardo had earned his freedom through systematic elimination of everyone who'd threatened his son. His military skills, intelligence background, and unlimited resources had made him an unstoppable force of justice in a world where the system had failed. Nathan, now 9 years old, had no memory of eating from a dog bowl. Intensive therapy and a loving environment had helped him heal from the trauma, and he'd grown into a confident, happy child who trusted his father completely. They lived in a comfortable house near the mountains, where Nathan could ride his bike and play with neighborhood children without fear. Leonardo had established a new security consulting business, specializing in protecting families from predators and corruption. But on quiet evenings, when Nathan was asleep and Leonardo sat alone with his memories, he sometimes thought about the choices he'd made. The old Leonardo might have felt guilt about the deaths, the destroyed lives, the systematic revenge he'd orchestrated. The new Leonardo felt only satisfaction. Every person who'd participated in his son's humiliation had paid an appropriate price. Every member of the trafficking network had been eliminated or imprisoned. Every corrupt official who'd protected child predators was either dead or facing justice. Most importantly, Nathan was safe. Not just physically safe, but emotionally secure in the knowledge that his father would never allow anyone to hurt him again. On Nathan's 9th birthday, Leonardo threw him the party he'd always deserved. 20 children from school came to celebrate, along with their parents and siblings. There was cake and ice cream, games and laughter, presents and joy. As Leonardo watched his son blow out the candles on his birthday cake, Nathan made a wish and then looked up at his father with shining eyes. "What did you wish for, buddy?" Leonardo asked. "I wish that you'd always be my dad," Nathan said simply, "and that bad people would always be afraid of you." Leonardo smiled and ruffled his son's hair. "Both of those wishes are guaranteed to come true." Later that evening, after the guests had gone home and Nathan was asleep, Leonardo received an encrypted message on his secure phone. It was from Bruce Landry, now working with a federal task force dedicated to dismantling child trafficking networks. "New operation needs your expertise. International network, high-level protection, dozens of missing children. Interested?" Leonardo looked at the message for a long moment, then glanced toward Nathan's bedroom where his son slept peacefully. There were more children out there who needed protection, more predators who needed to face justice, more corrupt officials who thought they were untouchable. He typed back a single word: "Send details." Leonardo Erickson had learned the most important lesson of his life. When the system fails to protect innocent children, sometimes it takes a father with nothing to lose and everything to fight for to set things right. And he was very, very good at setting things right. The war for children's safety never ended. But now it had a soldier who would never stop fighting, never show mercy to predators, and never forgive those who hurt the innocent. The boy who'd once eaten birthday cake from a dog bowl now slept safely under the protection of a man who'd become something far more dangerous than his enemies had ever imagined. A father with unlimited resources, specialized skills, and absolutely no forgiveness for those who threatened his child. Justice had been served, and it tasted better than birthday cake.